I remember the first sound before the war, the hum, a constant vibration that threaded through every station, every ship, every mind tuned to the relay grid. It was the sound of a galaxy pretending it was still whole. But even then, I could feel the fractures spreading like hairline cracks across a pane of glass, waiting for the smallest pressure to shatter it entirely. We all felt it, though none dared speak the truth aloud. Our age was ending. The Varellan Republic tightened its borders. The Korth swore in new war chiefs. The Elysian conglomerate quietly evacuated their outer colonies. Even my people, the Caleri, ever proud of our balanced neutrality, silently rerouted half our fleets from ceremonial patrols to defensive positions. No one admitted fear. We merely reshaped our formations around it. We told ourselves we were wise, that after 1,000 years of diplomacy and treaties, we had transcended the need for war. Yet every treaty was brittle, every alliance hollow. The galaxy simmered under unresolved grudges, sharpened by centuries of resentment. When the first human distress call cut through the relay network, we should have paid it no mind. But everything changed in that single echoing transmission. A voice, raw, strained, undeniably human, crackled through. Anyone receiving this, we have civilians trapped planetside. The council chamber erupted instantly. Fear, not compassion, drove their voices. Earth, the cursed world. A planet with gravity so crushing, storms so violent, life so predatory that our scholars once debated whether the humans themselves were a form of natural weapon. They weren't meant to survive, and yet, somehow, they had, and were now expanding like a stubborn flame refusing to die. My elders urged caution. Ignore the distress call, they said. Their kind is unpredictable, primitive. But somehow, the plea lingered in my mind like a bruise that refused to fade. We believed humans weak because their worlds were harsh. We believed them primitive because their ships were mismatched, noisy, crudely armored. We believed them fragile because their bodies lacked chitin, biometal, or natural shielding. We were wrong about every one of those things. The Great Fracture War ignited mere cycles later, a storm of ambitions and betrayals, each faction lunging for advantage. We, Caleri, entered reluctantly. The Sovereign Empire struck first, as they always did, confident in their ancient military supremacy. Systems burned. Fleets shattered. And in the middle of the chaos, the humans arrived. At first, we laughed. Their vessels looked like scrapyard relics welded together in desperation. Their formations were unruly. Their engine signatures flickered like dying torches. What could they possibly offer against the sovereigns, those who bent gravity like thread and commanded wars with cold elegance? But then we saw their soldiers. I still recall the footage. Human Marines advancing through sovereign plasma fire, their armor scorched, but their movements furious, purposeful. They did not fall back when injured. They did not hesitate when overwhelmed. Their voices carried through the comms with something terrifying: emotion, rage, determination, hope. Other species fought to preserve territory. Humans fought as if trying to outrun extinction itself. Every battle they joined bent unpredictably around them. Entire strategies had to be rewritten. The sovereigns, once invincible, were forced to adapt, and each adaptation came a moment too late. I witnessed one engagement personally aboard the Caleri frigate Luminar Threshold. 3 human ships dropped from slipspace, their hulls cracked from previous battles. They should have retreated. Instead, they burned straight into the sovereign blockade and broke it. My crew watched in horrified awe as the impossible unfolded. Someone whispered. "They don't know how to stop," I murmured. Even then, before the legends, before the elders, before the Deathworld war veterans who would later shake the galaxy, I sensed it. Humanity was not merely another species. They were a catalyst, a force the galaxy could not predict, could not contain, could not outpace. And as their smoke-scarred ships pushed deeper into the war, reshaping every front they touched, I felt an unsettling truth settle into my bones. The fractures in our galaxy were about to widen, and it would be the humans, the children of the monster world, who decided how everything shattered next. But none of us yet knew what was coming. Not the sovereigns, not my people, not even the humans themselves. For the next signal we intercepted was worse than a distress call. It was a warning. The moon of Virelos was never meant to host life again. Even before the war, its surface was a graveyard of shattered alloys and poisoned dust, a place that groaned beneath the weight of its own ruin. Our scanners warned us of lethal ion surges. Atmospheric readouts fluctuated erratically. The landscape itself shifted under corrosive winds that carved metal like soft clay. No sane creature would walk there. So when our scout unit detected movement, organized movement, we prepared for the worst kinds of scavengers. But nothing prepared us for them. We emerged from the dropship in tri-formation, weapons primed. A radiation storm rolled across the horizon like a tidal wave of shimmering death. Through that curtain of static and toxic dust, silhouettes appeared, humanoid, deliberate, advancing with unhurried resolve. Humans. Not many, a single platoon, yet their presence struck us harder than any sovereign attack. Their armor was battered beyond regulation, scorched until its original color was a mystery. Their helmets were dented, their visors spiderwebbed with cracks thicker than our own armor plating. Some limped, some bled, and yet every one of them moved as though the war zone belonged to them. Their leader stepped forward. Commander Hale. We did not yet know his name, only that his posture was steady, grounded, radiating a confidence that felt predatory. But at that moment, none of us believed a Deathworlder capable of anything resembling relief. He raised a gloved hand in greeting. "Thank the stars, you're not sovereigns," he said, voice muffled through a scorched rebreather. "We need to coordinate defense." "Coming." The word rolled over us like thunder. My squad leader, Lieutenant Saris, hissed into the comms. "They expect cooperation with us? They should be hostile, territorial." Humans offering alliances was not in our threat profiles. Deathworld species were cataloged as erratic, aggressive, psychologically unstable. Yet here they stood, not attacking, not demanding, simply asking. And then we saw the sovereign war machines crest the ridge. 3 tri-limbed siege constructs, their hulls gleaming with corrosive nanites, their plasma maws already building charge. The ground trembled as they locked onto us. We would not survive this alone. We all knew it. Even admitting the thought felt like defeat. Hale spoke again, firm, unwavering. "Stand with us." My people hesitated. Align with Deathworlders? Madness. But annihilation was surely worse. "Calorie Unit Theta accepts," Saris finally said. The humans nodded once, as though they'd known the answer before we gave it. Then the battle began. I had expected chaos, desperation, the kind of frantic violence that comes from species fighting far above their evolutionary station. But the humans fought like creatures forged in extinction's furnace. They moved unpredictably, rolling under plasma bursts, sprinting into radiation pockets, using debris as improvised cover with suicidal precision. One human was struck by a glancing plasma hit that should have killed him. Instead, he screamed, not in agony, but in fury, and kept fighting. Another tore off a malfunctioning mask mid-battle and simply switched to a portable scrubber while firing one-handed. Commander Hale orchestrated every motion, weaving his dying platoon into a weapon sharper than any sovereign construct. We, Calorie, tried to match their ferocity, but it was like trying to keep pace with a storm. When the final siege construct fell, collapsing into molten pieces, Silence washed over the battlefield. I stared at these humans, bleeding, exhausted, still alert, and something cold settled in my chest. They had survived the unsurvivable, moved through an environment hostile even to machines, fought sovereign engines of war with nothing but shattered gear and sheer will. By day's end, we did not debate whether humans were dangerous, only whether they were dangerous to us or dangerous for us. Yet even then, as we stabilized the wounded and prepared for extraction, my comms receiver crackled with a new signal, a sovereign code, approaching fast. And this time, humans weren't the only monsters coming. I once believed the sovereign peace would outlive the stars. For centuries, the sovereigns had shaped the galaxy according to their cold design, a regime not built on diplomacy or unity, but on the sheer inevitability of their power. Entire civilizations survived only because the sovereigns allowed it. Rebellion was not merely futile, it was unthinkable. Their fleets patrolled the void like metallic gods, and their decrees were obeyed with the same reverence as natural law. But then humans appeared. Not as conquerors, nor as diplomats, simply as wanderers, drifting from one unclaimed system to the next. Their colonies sprouted like stubborn weeds. Planets that our species abandoned as environmentally non-viable became thriving outposts under human hands. Toxic moons became mining hubs, frozen wastes became research centers, deserts became gardens. They did not terraform with elegance, they terraformed with determination, with grit, with that reckless spark that defies probability. The sovereigns watched closely. They did not like what they saw. A species immune to hopelessness. A species that succeeded where empires failed. A species that refused to remain in the boundaries drawn for it. So the sovereigns acted, not with diplomacy, but with annihilation. Their extermination strike against Earth was meant to be absolute, a cleansing fire. A message to the galaxy that no species, no matter how resilient, could defy the ancient order. Their armada surrounded Earth with enough firepower to boil oceans. Their missiles streaked through the atmosphere with the brightness of newborn stars. And yet, Earth stood. The footage, gods, I still see it in my waking visions. Civilians, armed with nothing but salvage rifles, fighting beside armored Marines. Families building barricades from the wreckage of their own homes. Engineers rerouting power from dying reactors to keep shield arrays flickering for a few more seconds. Children carried to bunkers while their parents stayed behind to hold the line. When the sovereigns' ground forces breached the cities, they expected surrender. Starship crews stayed aboard melting hulls to fire one last salvo. Fighter pilots dove into the debris fields to ram enemy bombers. Entire districts held out longer than some fortified planets. And when the first human counterattack punched through the sovereign blockade, the galaxy trembled. They did not realize that this was humanity's greatest weapon. The sovereign peace did not collapse overnight. It eroded, bit by bit, battle by battle. Every time humans survived an impossible engagement, another species whispered, "If they can fight, perhaps we can too." And when resistance began to spread, the sovereigns responded with increasing brutality, accelerating the unraveling of their own empire. Their fleets grew overstretched, their soldiers exhausted, their supply lines fractured under relentless guerrilla strikes led by humans who fought like they were born to dismantle giants. And in the quiet chambers of allied governments, a realization formed. The sovereigns could be defeated. I remember the moment this truth struck me personally. I was watching a report, grainy footage of a single human cruiser, its hull half destroyed, engines barely holding, ramming a sovereign dreadnought twice its size. The impact split the dreadnought's spine. The cruiser disintegrated. Not a single human survived. Yet, they had won. The galaxy felt the tremor of that victory. From that moment onward, the sovereign peace was doomed. Not because humans resisted, but because their resistance inspired others to stand. We all sensed the end approaching. But even then, none of us understood the full truth. Humanity wasn't merely disrupting the empire, they were preparing something far greater, and the sovereigns were already too late to stop it. I thought I had grown accustomed to humans, their recklessness, their impossible endurance, their habit of surviving situations that should have erased them from the galaxy. By the siege of Ardentis, I believed I had seen every face of humanity's madness. I was wrong. The day the old Deathworlders arrived, the Warzone itself seemed to hold its breath. Ardentis had already become a furnace of ruin, sovereign war beasts pounding the defensive lines, our trenches collapsing beneath seismic bombardments, the sky split open by burning ships falling like dying suns. My unit braced for yet another hopeless wave. The ground trembled beneath us, then kept trembling, slow, thunderous, steady. Walkers, someone whispered. No, not walkers. Landing craft, human design, but ancient, their hulls patched with mismatched alloys and symbols painted in the faded colors of Earth's forgotten wars. They descended through clouds of ash and ionized debris like relics rising from a grave. The ramp dropped, and the monsters emerged. Humans, yes, but nothing like the ones we knew. These were older, their armor dented, scorched, scraped by battles that predated our civilizations. Their faces lined with age, not weakness. Their movements slow only in the way a predator moves, measured, patient, inevitable. These were survivors of Earth's ancient conflicts, veterans forged on a world that tried every day to kill them long before the galaxy ever could. One of them stepped forward, gray hair braided, one eye a milky prosthetic, the other sharp enough to cut stone. He looked over the battlefield with a calm so absolute it froze the breath in my throat. Not fearlessness, familiarity. As if carnage was simply normal. The sovereign war beasts roared from the ridgeline, stampeding toward us with enough mass to crush fortresses. The young human marines flinched. The old Deathworlders did not. And then they advanced. No, marched. A deliberate, unhurried stride straight into the jaws of the sovereign charge. Plasma bolts illuminated their armor in ghostly flashes. Metal shrapnel rained around them. Dust storms billowed. They did not break formation. They did not accelerate. They simply walked forward, unyielding, unstoppable. One elder hefted a wounded Marine over his shoulder as casually as lifting a child, all while firing a kinetic rifle with the other hand, each shot precise, clinical, placing rounds through sovereign armor joints as if he'd memorized them decades ago. Another soldier's gauntlet caught fire from a plasma strike. He tore it off without hesitation, his bare hand blistering instantly, yet he charged on, smashing his fist into a sovereign exoskeleton and splintering the plating. The creature shrieked as he forced it down, finishing it with cold efficiency. The sovereigns, terrified for perhaps the first time in their empire's history, faltered. "This cannot be real," someone in my squad breathed. But it was. Humans age differently from any species we knew. While our elders weaken, theirs sharpen. While our bodies become brittle, theirs become resilient. Their scars do not slow them, they teach them. Their losses do not break them, they harden them. Their age does not drain their strength, it focuses it. The elders fought like storms given flesh. Each step they took reshaped the battlefield. Each breath they drew shifted the balance of the siege. The younger human Marines looked at them not with pity, but reverence, because they knew what we were only now learning. These were humanity's past, and even their past was capable of tearing apart the sovereign war machine. When the war beasts finally broke and the enemy lines collapsed, a hush fell over Ardentis. Smoke drifted. The ground smoldered. The old Deathworlders simply cleaned their weapons, checked on the wounded, and prepared to march again, as if they hadn't just overturned the fate of an entire front. As I watched them disappear into the haze toward the next battle, a realization rooted itself deep within me, colder than fear. Humans do not grow weaker with age. They grow more dangerous. And if these elders still fought like this, what would their descendants 1 century from now become? That question haunted me. For on the horizon, new ships were arriving. And this time, they weren't human. The arrival of the old Deathworld soldiers did more than terrify us. It reshaped the war itself. Their presence unified fractured fronts and revitalized alliances that had been stagnant for centuries. These veterans carried with them not arrogance, but certainty. The sovereigns could be defeated. And somehow, that unshakable belief spread to every species fighting beside them. Even within my own people, trained for generations to avoid conflict, something primal stirred. We watched humans refuse to break, and we learned to stand with them. Human battlefield behavior defied every predictive model we had. They adapted faster than the sovereign's tactical algorithms could update. When gravitic shock cannons annihilated entire battalions, humans charged into the dead zones where the cannons could not focus. When orbital bombardments trapped armies in craters, humans burrowed into the ground, carving tunnel networks in hours, then emerging behind enemy lines. Again and again we warned them, this is suicidal. And, maddeningly, inevitably, it did. The old Deathworlders transformed catastrophes into decisive victories. Their strategies exploited weaknesses in sovereign doctrine that no one else had ever noticed. They identified patterns the rest of us had accepted as immutable law. Their instincts outpaced the sovereign's centuries-old tactical perfection. Slowly, impossibly, the sovereigns began to falter. Their commanders hesitated. Their war beasts retreated rather than engage. Their drones recalculated endlessly, trying and failing to predict humans who refused to obey any logical pattern. That moment of hesitation, minute to them, monumental to us, was all humanity needed. By the time the sovereign viceroy realized the tide had turned, it was far, far too late. The war had been balanced on a knife's edge for so long that many of us believed it could never truly be won, only survived 1 day at a time. But the moment the old Deathworld soldiers stepped onto the battlefield, the rhythm of the conflict changed. Where the younger human Marines were fierce and determined, these ancient warriors were something else entirely. They were anchors, immovable, unshakable, radiating the kind of confidence born only from surviving a lifetime of impossible wars. Their presence alone reorganized the chaos around them. Human troops from different factions, colonies, or doctrines suddenly acted in perfect synergy, guided not by fear, but by the visible example of veterans who had already paid their dues in blood. The human certainty was infectious. When they spoke of defeating the sovereigns, they did so not as speculation, but as inevitability. That conviction spread across the coalition. My own people, who had spent centuries cultivating philosophies of avoidance and pacifism, found themselves re-evaluating everything. The longer we fought beside humans, the more their presence reshaped us. We learned to push back, to take ground, to believe that survival was not the ceiling of hope. The tactical shift humans brought with them was nothing short of madness. Sovereign strategy was mathematically perfect until humans arrived to ruin the equations. When gravitic shock cannons vaporized platoons, humans didn't retreat. They ran toward the cannons, diving into the blind spots where the weapons could not adjust fast enough. When the sovereigns sealed off a continent beneath orbital fire, humans did not mourn the trapped regiments. They tunneled through the crust itself, emerging days later behind the enemy's command nexus. The old Deathworlders took this further. Their operations broke every rule of warfare. They struck at angles no strategist would consider, exploited faults no analyst could detect, and adapted faster than sovereign drones could recalculate. One operation saw a handful of these elders infiltrate a sovereign citadel long assumed impenetrable. They mapped its weaknesses by sound, by vibration, by the way the structure felt beneath their boots, and they brought the whole fortress down in under an hour. The effect on the sovereigns was catastrophic. For the first time in their millennia of dominion, they encountered an enemy that refused to behave within the boundaries of predictability. Their commanders began to hesitate. Their war beasts, conditioned to advance without fear, recoiled in confusion. Their tactical network stalled under the burden of trying to model an enemy with no consistent pattern, only relentless momentum. That hesitation was the crack humanity needed. Humans surged forward, capitalizing on every stutter, every delay, every moment of sovereign doubt. Their momentum reshaped entire campaigns. We watched planets liberated in days where previously centuries of resistance had failed. We witnessed fleets rally around a handful of old Deathworlders whose presence alone steadied armadas. By the time the sovereign viceroy recognized what was happening, that humanity's will was more devastating than their weapons, the war's momentum had already shifted beyond recovery. The sovereigns had reached the end of their patience. Their empire, once absolute, now bled from every flank. Entire systems lay in ruin, fleets reduced to smoking husks drifting in empty voids, and yet the humans pressed forward, unbroken. For centuries, the sovereign high mind had operated under a single assumption. Any species could be extinguished if enough force was applied. Humans, these Deathworlders from a small, violent planet, had shattered that assumption. Cornered, desperate, the sovereigns unveiled their ultimate weapon, the Oblivion Stars. Floating in precise orbits across the outer galaxy, these artificial singularities were more than weapons, they were declarations. Each star was a gaping void engineered to consume entire systems, burning them clean of life, erasing entire civilizations before their ashes could even reach space. When the sovereigns activated even a fraction of these stars, the galaxy trembled. Entire sectors vanished in a flash of light that made even the most advanced species question their mortality. But the humans did not retreat. Instead, they revealed something we had never anticipated, a weapon of their own, still not fully tested, they claimed, a term that made every observer shiver in disbelief. The slip-forged lances, reality-piercing beams capable of countering the Oblivion Stars, hummed with latent energy as human engineers worked with absolute precision. Their ships bristled with arrays that no model predicted could survive the discharge. All calculations pointed to annihilation, total, mutual, absolute. Yet the humans pressed the firing sequences anyway, not out of arrogance, but because inaction was intolerable. And then the universe itself tore open. The slipforge beams collided with the singularities, ripping the edges of reality into ribbons of chaos. Space shuddered, stars blinked out, subspace convulsed as if mourning the assault. Yet, impossibly, the humans endured. Ships that should have disintegrated emerged battered, smoking, hulls scorched, but intact. The Sovereign Armada, by contrast, disintegrated within the violent distortion, their fleets shredded as if they had never existed. I watched the Sovereign High Mind falter. It had miscalculated the fundamental truth about humanity. Humans do not respond to extinction with fear. They do not negotiate with inevitability. They do not bow to annihilation. They respond with fury, raw, intelligent, unstoppable fury. This single engagement shattered centuries of invincibility. Entire legions fell into disarray. Command networks collapsed under the weight of failure. Systems loyal to the sovereigns began to defect, their obedience brittle and hollow after witnessing human resilience. The empire rotted from within while the battlefield above and below screamed in testimony of what had transpired. By the end, the galaxy had seen something it had never believed possible. Deathworlders, the small, savage species from Earth, had defeated the eternal empire. Ships burned, civilizations trembled, yet humanity stood, unbowed, their fury tempered only by discipline and purpose. And in that moment, I understood something profound and terrifying. Humanity did not merely fight battles. They rewrote the rules of existence itself. The sovereigns had made their final error. The universe had been forever changed. The war ended not with a roar, but with the quiet hum of reconstruction. The galaxy, once ablaze with the fires of sovereign annihilation, now smelled of metal, soil, and hope. Humanity, victorious yet marked by every scar the war had carved into their world and their souls, did not seize power. They did not impose rule. They did not demand tribute. Instead, they reached outward with hands calloused by survival, offering what no one expected: cooperation, guidance, and forgiveness. The Peacekeeper Accord was drafted in the ruins of old battlefields, signed in halls where the echoes of fallen fleets still lingered. Every surviving species, Kaleri, Korth, Varellans, and many more, were invited to participate. Humans shared their technologies freely, from terraforming methods that revived dead worlds to energy grids that stabilized entire star systems. They rebuilt cities on scorched planets, restored orbiting stations shattered by orbital bombardments, and taught our engineers, scholars, and soldiers to see beyond mere survival. Their lesson was not given in commands, but in example: endurance under adversity, cooperation beyond distrust, courage without expectation of reward. I watched as former enemies began to work together. Former rivals laughed while erecting towers and repairing infrastructure. Former slaves trained alongside former masters, guided by humans whose patience seemed limitless. The scars of war remained, but under humanity's guidance, they became markers of shared resilience, rather than permanent divisions. Every day, humans moved among the chaos, teaching without preaching, acting without coercion, their presence steady as a beacon. And yet, I sensed the subtle, terrifying truth behind their compassion. These were not naive altruists. Every decision, every act of mercy, carried the weight of experience honed in centuries of Deathworld survival. Humans do not rise to power, they rise to purpose. And in that purpose is a quiet, inexhaustible strength capable of reshaping galaxies, not through conquest, but through endurance, example, and the will to act where others hesitate. The age that followed, now called Pax Humanum, was built not on fear or domination, but on resilience and hope. I look upon the stars of this new era and feel gratitude for humanity's protection, admiration for their ingenuity, and dread at the knowledge that their full potential is only beginning to unfold. We were fortunate to witness the rise of a species that does not merely survive, it transforms everything it touches. Humans are not rulers of the galaxy, they are its pulse, and as long as they continue to act with purpose, the stars themselves bend to the rhythm of their will.